Chapter 4 AblationVax, the cancer ablation vaccine.
I cannot imagine even one cancer patient who would not be excited about the idea of having their cancer successfully treated by just inserting a needle into a malignant tumor and destroying it directly. As previously discussed, image-guided cancer ablation involves using computer tomography, CT, or ultrasound to help the physician guide a needle through the body and insert it directly into the tumor. The tumor can then be directly destroyed by either heating it with microwaves or radio frequency, or by freezing it through cryoablation. The idea sounds so simple, yet few patients know that this treatment is an option. We are now able to directly freeze or burn many tumors without removing them. Why wouldn't we just remove them? Well, it turns out that one of the keys to successful immunotherapy is leaving the destroyed tumor in the body. This is how our immune system can gather intel about the cancer to more effectively fight it. Though I am mainly going to discuss how the powerful combination of cryoablation and immunotherapy works well for treating advanced cancers, it is also increasingly being considered for treating early-stage cancer as well, especially in cases of breast, lung, and liver cancer where ablation is being looked at as a future surgery replacement. I expect to see cryoablation used more frequently in early-stage cancer, along with immune-enhancing measures to reduce the risk of future metastasis. When cancer moves beyond its very early stages, it is systemic and can spread throughout the body. After primary tumors are removed by surgery, cancer patients are often told, "We got all of it." This isn't true. Even if you remove the primary tumor, cancer cells still remain and are able to proliferate and form new tumors over time. In cases of advanced cancer, when a tumor is killed by ablation, the dead cancer cells act like a vaccine, causing the immune response to kick in to attack foreign bodies, including remaining cancer cells in the body. However, this does not usually happen without a little help from some type of immunotherapy. Hardly anyone, including doctors who perform this procedure, realize that cryoablation can be used to generate a powerful immune response, leading to one of the most successful cancer treatments that exist, particularly for patients with stages 3 or 4 cancer, where the options for treatment are most limited. Each year, there are approximately 600,000 advanced cancers diagnosed in the US, which would otherwise be practically hopeless cases. But with this ablation technique, combined with immunotherapy, we now have the chance to save many of those lives. Moreover, patients with early stages of cancer who would otherwise suffer throughout toxic chemotherapy and radiation now have more effective choices of treatment with far fewer side effects. I like to call this combination therapy AblationVax because of how it optimizes the body's immune system, similar to how vaccines do. When I was in medical school and early residency and learned about the potential of this technique to treat cancer, I thought it was the most amazing thing I had heard, and assumed word of this new strategy would spread quickly and all oncologists would jump on board. I recognized that the future of cancer treatment would be to target the tumor directly using minimally invasive techniques and image guidance. But I have since discovered that these ablation techniques have been slow to catch on. Even now, years later, the techniques are vastly underutilized. The reluctance of oncologists to treat patients with cryoablation and immunotherapy, AblationVax, may be because health insurance does not always cover it. And few physicians want to engage in treatment plans that are costly, not covered by insurance, and remain relatively new. Moreover, oncologists who oversee and control most of the cancer care their patients receive are not trained in cryoablation and lack the necessary skill to perform the procedure. And I could not imagine that any oncologist would be excited about giving up the control of cancer treatment to the radiologist, as it would surely lead to the end of their specialty. It is for these reasons I believe that this procedure may not take off until the oncologists themselves learn to do it. This is much like treating atherosclerotic heart disease with coronary angioplasty. This procedure was invented by the radiologist Charles Dotter in 1964. While coronary angioplasty is extremely common today, it did not take off until the mid to late 1980s. Prior to that time, radiologists had been performing the procedures and cardiologists were reluctant to recommend them. Once cardiologists started doing them, however, they became routine. Also, I might add, insurance coverage for the procedure helped as well. Over time, I am confident that this reluctance by oncologists to use cryoablation will change. Image-guided ablation, when done correctly, can stimulate an anti-cancer immune response, although when done alone, it is generally not curative outside of cases of limited disease or early cancer. However, I would like to add food for thought here. What if the early stage patients that we treat with ablation also had some immune-stimulating agents added as well? How many cancers would we have prevented from ever becoming advanced in the first place? I would say that most could be, and it is of course the advanced cancers that are the real killers. I suspect that most, if not all, doctors performing ablation procedures do not fully understand how it interacts with the immune response. The type of ablation technique used, whether freezing throughout cryoablation or heating through microwaves and radiofrequency, and the tumor size are some of the key aspects to creating an effective immune response. The combination of immunotherapy and ablation is highly effective, but each of these therapies must be done simultaneously for them to be effective. Studies by Dan Brock show that timing of immunotherapy procedures is also critical. In other words, not all ablation is created equal, and when not administered correctly, it can be harmful if it leads to enhancement of the regulatory immune system, thinking the tumor belongs there, and allows the cancer cells to flourish. Because so few doctors are trained and experienced in achieving the best combination of these treatments, most are unfamiliar with, if not hostile to, ablation and immunotherapy treatments. And unfortunately, since cancer patients are customers who provide their livelihood, far too many oncologists are hesitant to admit they lack the skill to treat their patients with these advanced techniques, and thus, they are reluctant to refer them to someone else who may be able to do better, particularly if they haven't had any direct experience with it they might regard as an experimental technique. The radiologist relies mostly on referrals from other doctors, so they certainly do not want to upset their oncologist, who can be a major referrer. Even though there are many skilled radiologists who could do this procedure, there is not enough to service the potential future demand of this and other image-guided cancer procedures when these techniques take off. Though our scientific understanding of ablation continues to advance, I think it would take oncologists learning to do this procedure for the therapy to become more widely available. Unfortunately, this requires many years of training in imaging and image-guided procedures, which is a real barrier to entry. However, just as cardiologists have done a great job getting into image-guided heart procedures, I am sure that oncologists can do it as well. It may just add some years to their training, just like it did in cardiology. I certainly welcome this and will be glad to train them when the time comes. It is time for a paradigm shift in the treatment of cancer, and our loyalty must be to curing the patient, not to the future of any particular medical specialty. It is only a matter of time that these jobs will be done by robots and AI, artificial intelligence, anyway. At this time, in our profit-oriented medical system, there is a little incentive for oncologists to encourage cryoablation immunotherapy, AblationVax, for their patients, And most cancer patients remain uninformed of the breakthroughs we have had, particularly for those with advanced stage cancer. In our early efforts to treat patients through cryoablation and immunotherapy, it was initially thought that the patients who would have the most success were those whose cancer was discovered at an early stage before it had spread through the body. When I first began doing ablation procedures, some 16 plus years ago, I felt that even among those with advanced disease, if I could reduce tumor bulk by 50 to 70%, that it would be a huge success. Even if I did not cure those patients, I could give them precious added months or even years to live without the wretched side effects of radiation and chemotherapy. Yet when I discussed my views with many of my colleagues, I was startled to find that few shared my views. The consensus was that we should focus on the patients with the best chance of survival, those with stage 1 and stage 2 cancers. A 50 to 70% reduction in tumor bulk was not considered much of a success for advanced patients. Yet, had any chemotherapy been capable of the same reduction in tumor bulk, it would be considered very successful. There seemed to be two dueling standards of success among my colleagues. One for the tried and true chemotherapy, and the other for the new and growing field of research in radiofrequency and cryoablation. We were the new kids on the block, and the old guard was wary. Undaunted, I began taking on many cases that others considered too advanced or hopeless to bother with. These were the patients who often had no other options. My philosophy was, if it was myself, and there was something that at least had a chance of helping me, I would take it. I also felt that it was just common sense. Less cancer is better, at least if it didn't bring more misery. Certainly, when fighting a war, when you reduce the number of your enemy, you are making progress. I was optimistic, but unprepared for how successful my approach proved to be. While many patients did die from their advanced disease, a fair number of the patients who came to me with stage 3 and stage 4 cancers did far better than I ever could have imagined. One key thing that I observed was that rarely but significantly, a patient's non-treated tumors would shrink or disappear after another tumor had been treated. This was what happened with my colleague's mother, who I discussed in chapter 1. We had only treated the tumors in one lung, yet the tumors in the other lung had disappeared by the time of her next visit. A similar and much more remarkable case encouraged me even further. In 2003, a gentleman from Atlanta, Georgia, contacted me, hoping I would consider performing ablation. He had metastatic melanoma, with more than 30 lesions in one of his lungs, and his death was imminent. I had to tell him that he had too many lesions and I did not feel ablation would help. Asking me to reconsider, he said he had a strong belief that ablation was the answer. Still, I declined, again explaining that his cancer was far too advanced. But he was persistent, rejecting my logic and appealing to my emotions. He told me that his doctors had told him that he only had 1 to 3 months to live. But his daughter was getting married in 5 months, and he wanted to walk her down the aisle. He was certain that ablation would give him the extra time he needed to see his daughter get married. How could I possibly deny this man the one chance he thought would help, even if I felt otherwise? I agreed to perform the ablation, but I was frank with him and told him I still didn't think it would help. I told him my plan was to ablate as much as possible in a series of procedures because his tumors were so numerous that it would not be possible to ablate them all in a single procedure. There was not a realistic way to ablate all the tumors, but I think I even convinced myself that my motto of less cancer is always better would hold true in his case as well. Satisfied that I would at least give him the chance he sought, he agreed to my plan. Shortly after, I performed the first ablation without any problems, as is typical for ablation, and asked him to return in a month for a second procedure, not certain he would make it that long. But a month later, he did return, and we performed a CT scan to assist the progression of the tumors to prepare for the next procedure. As the images came across the computer, I could not believe my eyes. The lesions were gone, all of them. We had not touched the other lesions, yet they had disappeared. I wept, realizing in that moment that I had just witnessed something amazing, something that would change the history of cancer treatment, perhaps even turn out to be the greatest advance in cancer treatment to date. It was something so simple. We did not have to cut people open to remove their tumors. Just like a biopsy, we could simply insert a needle into a tumor and heat or freeze it to destroy it directly. The discovery was almost too good to be true. It had been a childhood dream of mine since my grandmother's illness and death to cure cancer. I had so wanted to make my grandmother proud, to somehow avenge her death by catching her killer, and to save countless other lives. And here it was, staring me in the face in the form of these CT scan images. What had been over 30 lesions had miraculously disappeared. It was better than winning the lottery 1,000 times over. I thought, out of all the possible areas I could have been involved in medicine, in cancer, could I have been lucky enough to pick the right one, a legitimate road to a cure? About a year after treating this gentleman from Atlanta, he contacted me again. His cancer had unfortunately returned, though it was not quite as bad as before. He asked me if I could try the same procedure once more. It had enabled him to achieve his goal of walking his daughter down the aisle. But now there was another goal. His daughter was pregnant, and she was due in several months. Could I help him to see the birth of his first grandchild? Of course, this time, I didn't have to put much thought into it. We performed the procedure, and once again, within a month, the visible lesion in his lungs were gone. But the success was bittersweet. Having succeeded in eliminating them the first time, only to have them return shortly after, I knew that the challenge before me was not just to eliminate the tumors, but to make sure they didn't return. And how could I ensure that the success we had with one gentleman could be repeated with others? How could I ensure that the response was the same for other advanced cases? As time went on, the answers to these questions would become more evident, but it would take nearly another decade of research and practice. In the meantime, my patient did live to see the birth of his grandchild, and I hope to see other birthdays as well. Unfortunately, I was unable to keep treating him due to hospital and insurance policies, limiting our use of ablation outside very limited areas. I moved on to another hospital, and the patient and I lost touch after a couple more years. While I am almost certain that his cancer did return, I feel better just thinking that there is a chance that he is still alive after all these years. I am, however, confident that if we had the weapons that we have now, he would still be alive to see his grandchildren graduate and marry. Even if his cancer did return, one thing I am certain of is that his treatment was not in vain. Not only was he able to have at least 3 more years of good health after being given a prognosis of 1 to 3 months, the amazing success of his ablation procedure kept me going whenever I became discouraged, and it keeps me going today. Ablation had triggered a powerful immune response that eliminated over 24 tumors without even touching them. Those rare but fascinating responses were what led me to suspect an immune response similar to a vaccine had been set in action by the ablation process. Ablation kills tumors in the body and leaves dead pieces, known as antigens, for the immune system to recognize. This is providing the intel your immune cells need to know what to look for to find the enemy. Also, What is now known is that ablation creates an inflammatory process that is also immune stimulating, what we call danger signals. These are some of the signals to attract your immune cells, attackers, to the location of the bad guys. In fact, when you look at the immune aspects, ablation can be a very effective